From London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories.
What is happening in Gaza reflects a genocide in the making.
South Africa presents its case at the United Nations top court. Israel calls it baseless. Our other headlines: deadly airstrikes continue across Gaza. Israel claims it has no intention of permanently occupying the territory. A state of emergency in Papua New Guinea, with at least 15 people dead during rioting and looting. And Electric Avenue, how Hungary is preparing to become a major manufacturing hub for China's biggest EV maker. South Africa has been outlining its case at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. The legal action was filed by South Africa in December in a move welcomed by several countries amid global pressure for a ceasefire. South Africa is also demanding an emergency suspension of Israel's military campaign in the Palestinian enclave. Well, our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports now from The Hague.
An unprecedented case at the UN's Court of Justice, which could have an impact on the ongoing Gaza war. For 2 hours, South Africa presented its allegations, asking for a suspension of Israel's warfare in the Gaza Strip.
For the past 96 days, Israel has subjected Gaza to what has been described as one of the heaviest conventional bombing campaigns in the history of modern warfare.
According to Palestinian officials, Israeli forces killed more than 23,000 people in Gaza. Israel, on the other side, says Hamas are terrorists who murdered over 1,000 Israelis on October 7. During the South Africa hearing, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the court in The Hague.
We are not against Israel, but what they are doing is the worst what we have ever seen, what the world has ever seen, and it should stop right away.
It might take years for the court to determine a final ruling. However, it is possible that the court will decide on a provisional ceasefire within just weeks, which, however, could have no effect as the court's rulings are not enforceable.
Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reporting there from The Hague. Well, this case is not a criminal trial. The ICJ will deliver an opinion on the genocide allegation, but it's being keenly watched internationally. Established in 1945, the ICJ is the United Nations' highest legal body, ruling on disputes between countries as well as giving advisory opinions. The 1948 Genocide Convention, which has been ratified by 153 countries, including South Africa and Israel, defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethical, racial or religious group. South Africa filed its 184-page brief last week, arguing Israel's actions in Gaza are genocidal in character because they're intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnic group. Israel says those claims are baseless. Well, the full case is likely to take years, but interim emergency measures could be issued within weeks. The court's ruling will be final but it cannot enforce its decisions. Well, let's talk now to Michael Becker, Assistant Professor of International Human Rights Law at Trinity College, Dublin. Michael, good to see you. First of all, what evidence has South Africa presented to support its claims of genocide?
South Africa's evidence really is made up of two different parts. So on the one hand, South Africa is going to be pointing to the on-the-ground evidence. So this includes the evidence of the widespread killing of civilians, evidence that suggests indiscriminate or reckless bombing campaigns, and also the widespread destruction of housing, crucial, critical infrastructure, indeed the very infrastructure that's necessary to sustain basic life. So we have the on-the-ground evidence of what's happening in Gaza, and that's going to be paired with this evidence that is really coming from Israeli officials themselves. So South Africa is going to point to statements made at the highest levels of the Israeli government and the Israeli military apparatus that, in South Africa's view, provide direct evidence of genocidal intent. Statements that seem to conflate Hamas with the Palestinian people of Gaza as a whole.
Just talk us through the timeline, if you would. What's expected and how quickly could we hear any sort of ruling?
So as your correspondent mentioned, a ruling on the merits of this case, so the ultimate claim that Israel is in breach of its obligations under the Genocide Convention, that will take years. This is the start of a very long process. But the hearings this week are about a kind of emergency relief, provisional measures that can be put in place, essentially to try to safeguard the lives of Palestinians while the case is pending. I would expect the court to move very quickly on this, and we should see a decision, I would estimate, within 2 to 3 weeks.
Just to be absolutely clear, this is not a criminal trial. The ICJ will deliver only an opinion on the genocide allegation. But how significant is this?
You're right. It's not a criminal proceeding. That's for the International Criminal Court to take up. But a final judgment from the International Court of Justice is a binding, authoritative legal statement. States take decisions by the ICJ very seriously, and the ICJ is a critical actor in defining what international law means and how it works. So the way this case is ultimately decided is going to say an awful lot about what the Genocide Convention actually means and whether it has any real practical application in the modern world.
And of all the countries to drive this through, why South Africa? Why is South Africa bringing this case?
Well, the Genocide Convention is a very special kind of international instrument because it is understood to promote a collective interest, an interest that all states that are parties to that treaty share, preventing and punishing the crime of genocide. And so any number of states could have brought this case against Israel. For various reasons, the political will exists within South Africa to do that. South Africa historically has been a very strong supporter of the Palestinian cause. And South Africa, of course, has its own experience with apartheid. And South Africa has pointed to that as being one of the factors that has motivated its decision to intervene in this way.
What's at stake, do you think, for the ICJ and its reputation here?
It's certainly the case that as the ICJ gets drawn into what are highly political disputes in many respects, that creates certain risks for the court. But ultimately, this is a court of law. The ICJ is going to approach the questions put to it from a legal perspective. They're going to draw upon the canons of treaty interpretation. They're going to draw upon their own case law. This isn't the first time that the Genocide Convention has come in front of the International Court of Justice. And they are going to do the best that they can to sort through conflicting factual claims and conflicting legal arguments. So ultimately, I don't think, for example, as some have argued, I don't think the fact that at the end of the day, states might not comply with what the ICJ says, or not everyone will necessarily agree with how the ICJ interprets these instruments, that's a reason not to make use of this international court that sits at the very center of the international legal order.
Michael, I'm sure we'll talk more in the coming weeks, but for the moment, thank you. Michael Becker, Assistant Professor of International Human Rights Law at Trinity College in Dublin. Well, the Israeli military continues to launch attacks across the Gaza Strip, insisting it is targeting Hamas infrastructure. But dozens more civilians have been killed. Israel has vehemently rejected South Africa's accusations at the ICJ as baseless. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his country has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Let's talk now to our correspondent Trent Murray, watching events for us in Tel Aviv. Trent, Israel will present its defence at the ICJ tomorrow. What can we expect?
Well, I think if the statement that we've just had from the Foreign Ministry is any indication, they are going to defend against these accusations rigorously. The Foreign Ministry is saying South Africa's case is, and I'm going to quote here, one of the greatest displays of hypocrisy in history. They go on to accuse Pretoria of acting as the legal arm for Hamas, ignoring the fact that Hamas terrorists infiltrated Israel, murdered, executed, slaughtered, raped and kidnapped Israeli civilians just because they were Israelis. This was an attempt at real genocide. I know that certainly much of the discussion here today is around how South Africa plans to defend itself and the types of arguments it's going to use. We understand it will centre around the fact that there were leaflet drops, multiple leaflet drops, text messages sent to civilians to try and get them out of harm's way in the fighting. We also understand that some of that rhetoric which was used against Israel by senior ministers will be argued that that does not reflect official Gaza policy. And we also expect there to be some discussions potentially around the fact that if Israel really wanted to commit genocide, then it could have certainly gone a lot harder in its military campaign. It's obviously very delicate, the entire discussion, but we know that Israel certainly is going to defend itself in this case, and a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing today is they are going to defend it rigorously.
Trent, let's just put the legal proceedings to one side and talk about the military operation, because Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been talking about the military operation in Gaza. What have we heard?
Yeah, that's right. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu releasing a short statement overnight on social media, notably in English, which I think clearly indicates the intended audience was one internationally, and it was discussing the future of Gaza and the fact that Palestinians still absolutely have the right to live there, in his view. Now, this, of course, I think comes off the back of some of those comments we've seen from, for example, the Finance Minister Smotrich around this idea that potentially Palestinians could be emigrated to third countries, seemingly Benjamin Netanyahu trying to just row back that rhetoric and that tone of language, because we know it really did not go down well, even with the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, when he was here in Israel earlier this week, made it clear that the American policy is for Gazans and Palestinians living in Gaza, rather, should absolutely continue to live there. I'll just read you briefly what Benjamin Netanyahu said. He said, I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing the civilian population. He went on to say the IDF is doing its utmost to minimise civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximise them. Jamie.
Trent, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. 2 Russian missiles have struck a hotel in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. 11 people were reportedly injured. The mayor claims foreign journalists are among those injured in this attack. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky has arrived in Estonia as part of his tour of Baltic countries, where he warned any pauses in Ukraine's defences against Russia would only help Moscow rearm.
Russia has a deficit. We can see how this deficit affects their resilience on the battlefield. Give a break, take a risk, give the Russian Federation 2 to 3 years, well, they will simply run us over.
Iran says it seized an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, which was heading from Iraq to Turkey. This comes after the vessel's Greek operators said it had lost contact with the St. Nicholas. The same ship was seized last year by the United States, which claimed it was carrying Iranian oil in breach of sanctions. A state of emergency has been declared in Papua New Guinea, with at least 15 people dead during rioting and looting. The violence erupted as police went on strike over pay. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins reports.
The capital, Port Moresby, burning on Wednesday night. Shops and cars set alight. Supermarkets looted. The police on strike. Earlier in the day, officers joined other public sector pay workers demonstrating against a 50% pay cut, which the government said was caused by a computer glitch. These protesters didn't believe it. Some of them tried to break into Parliament, while looters took advantage of the situation to attack shops. Several people were killed, many injured, including 2 Chinese nationals.
After being informed of the incident, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs instructed the embassy in Papua New Guinea to immediately activate the emergency mechanism for consular protection, and the embassy has lodged solemn representations with the Papua New Guinea government, urging it to take prompt and vigorous measures to ensure the safety of local Chinese citizens and organisations with all its might.
On Thursday, businesses, including this retail chain, were cleaning up and counting the cost.
In 48 years of independence, I can't recall in my lifetime seeing this level of devastation in a single day event. It's just senseless, it's unacceptable, and, you know, we just need to have a really good hard look at ourselves and challenge to how we got to this place and what we're doing to make sure we come out of it pretty quickly.
That's a job for Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister.
I encourage all our citizens to step out today and give respect to your country one more time. Encourage your neighborhood. That yesterday did happen, we acknowledge, we look into how we could correct, we look at how we would bring responsible people to face a full arm of law. Police were not at work yesterday in the city, and people resorted to lawlessness up and about. Not all people, but in certain segments of our city.
Police are now back on duty and 1,000 troops are on standby, while a 2-week state of emergency has been declared. But rising unemployment and inflation have fueled public dissatisfaction, meaning the tense situation isn't just tech-related. Paul Hawkins, CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, how a city in Hungary is preparing to become a major production centre to manufacture China's electric cars.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. South Africa presents its genocide case against Israel at the United Nations top court. Tel Aviv calls it baseless. Our other headlines: deadly airstrikes continue across Gaza. Israel claims it has no intention of permanently occupying the territory. Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo has arrived in Beijing at the start of his official visit to China. This follows an invitation from Premier Li Qiang. Our correspondent Yo Yang reports.
This is actually the first visit to China by a European leader in 2024, and also the first high-level engagement between China and Belgium since 2019. One notable thing that starting this January, Belgium assumed the presidency of the Council of the European Union, marking the 13th mandate, and the country will hold the position for a total 6 months until June this year. So many believe the cruise trip will also focus on the relations between China and the European Union. On the other hand, according to a statement released by the PM's office, the China-Belgium relationship, as well as economic connections between the two sides, will also top the agenda. Belgium's Foreign Minister Aja Lahbib is also in China. She arrived in the city of Shanghai just ahead of the cruise trip. But she will join the crew in Beijing on Thursday, and the Belgian local media said Chinese President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang are expected to meet with them. The year 2024 marks the 53rd anniversary since China and Belgium established diplomatic ties. As one of the earliest Western countries to cooperate with China, Belgium is currently the 7th largest trading partner with China within the European market. An article by China's ambassador to Belgium, Cao Zhongming, was published in the EU Reporter this week, in which it said that China and Belgium are all-round friendly and cooperative partners, adding that both countries firmly support multilateralism and an open world economy. In terms of China-EU relations, many analysts say the European Union is facing a rather complex situation at the start of this year, after European Council President Charles Michel announced that he will step down early, and this setting off a race against time for EU leaders to find a successor for the key position. Meanwhile, France is reshuffling its own cabinet and welcoming a new Prime Minister. Thus, experts say all this makes for more uncertainties at the European Council summit to be held this March. And a stable China-EU relationship will help to cope with major issues and the challenges facing the international community. Yo Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
The Hungarian city of Szeged has been chosen to be the production base for Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD and its first European car manufacturing facility. Our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez reports.
The new factory from the world's largest electric automaker is poised to give a significant boost to the local Hungarian economy.
Just because of this project, this area will have the certain place on the map.
Antal Joseph Metzaros is the CEO of one of the companies involved in building the roads near BYD's upcoming manufacturing plant. He anticipates an increased demand for even more infrastructure projects once the factory's construction starts.
By last year, we employed 123 people.
Yeah. Would you be hiring more if you get the contract to do more?
We will.
Yeah?
We will hire and we can hire.
BYD's manufacturing plant will cover approximately 3 square kilometers and is expected to create approximately 3,000 jobs in Szeged and the surrounding area. According to Hungary's government, this initiative is one of the most substantial investments in the country's recent history.
The presence of a multinational company is significant because it sets in motion a multiplying effect in our city.
Dr. Attila Kukuti is the president of Szeged's Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He says BYD's investment will significantly enhance the local economy. Szeged's primary industries are food processing and agriculture, but the local Chamber of Commerce says that the establishment of BYD's manufacturing plant here will have a ripple effect on other segments of the economy, such as tourism, retail, and services, making it more attractive to visitors and boosting the city's economy. Last year, BYD sold 1.8 million battery-powered vehicles worldwide, including plug-in hybrids, outpacing Tesla, which sold 1.3 million electric cars.
In the long term is that this positions Hungary really at the heart of this green transition to electric vehicles.
BYD's planned factory will be close to the Belgrade-Budapest railway line, currently under construction.
And for this factory to be there on that rail line right beside the Serbian border means that it's an important plus for Hungary. It shows that this new railway that's being developed will stimulate new industry.
BYD's plant will be constructed in multiple phases over the course of 3 years. Hungary is accelerating infrastructure projects with the aim they will solidify the country's status as a key European hub for battery and electric vehicle manufacturers. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Szeged, Hungary.
The world's most powerful solid-fuel rocket has been launched in China. It's also the biggest spacecraft ever developed by a private Chinese company. Our correspondent Wu Lei reports.
What a historic moment. The Gravity 1 rocket has successfully carried out its maiden flight from the sea, putting 3 Yunyao-1 meteorological satellites into orbit. Gravity 1 is now the world's most powerful solid-fuel launch vehicle. It's capable of carrying around 6,500 kilograms of payload into low Earth orbit or 4,200 kilograms into sun-synchronous orbit at an altitude of 500 kilometers. Developed by Orion Space, a commercial startup, Gravity 1 consists of 3 solid stages and 4 boosters. With a total height of 30 meters, the rocket has a takeoff weight of 400 metric tons and a takeoff thrust of 600 metric tons.
So you can see there is a nearly explosion of the new launch market for satellite internet and also remote sensing satellites. So actually we have signed contracts of hundreds of satellites to the orbit.
It can launch multiple satellites as well as small cargo spacecraft weighing up to 4 tons.
We will build a one-stop sea launch service system in the Oriental Spaceport in the future. We will complete the final assembly, testing, transfer and launch of rockets within 5 kilometers.
There are over 400 commercial space companies across China. They are developing rockets, satellites, and other space applications. More than 3,000 people came to witness the Gravity 1 launch.
This mission has largely encouraged the whole private space industry. As a satellite company, we will have more options on rockets made by private companies.
Orion Space says it aims to develop more recoverable rockets in the coming years, offering more competitive launch vehicles to customers from home and abroad. Wu Lei, CGTN, Haiyang City, Shandong Province.
The headlines again. South Africa presents its genocide case against Israel at the United Nations top court. Israel calls it baseless. Our other headlines: deadly airstrikes continue across Gaza. Israel claims it has no intention of permanently occupying the territory. A state of emergency is declared in Papua New Guinea, with at least 15 people dead during rioting and looting. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.